Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Tnooz webinar, this time produced in association with Sabre Travel Network. Thank you very much, of course, to them. Really good one coming up, we hope, and we've been rehearsing this over the last 45 minutes or so, and the presentations are excellent. What we wanted to do with this particular one, and it goes under the title of Beyond B2C, how new technology enables personalization in business travel. Many of you will have been at the GBTA conference last week, and there's a lot of discussion going on in the business travel community about, how such tools are allowing personalization in business travel. But we think that, and our friends here at Sabre certainly think that there's enough discussion here and enough movement in the industry around policy and profiles and how the influence of mobile and indeed content is really kind of turning things on its head and shaping things. There's a new type of traveller, and there's customization, and there's all sorts of changes and indeed challenges, but also, of course, opportunities for the industry to learn about how some of these issues are playing out and how they will play out going forward. So briefly, I'm Kevin May. I'm the editor and one of the co-founders at Tnooz.com, and I'm your moderator for today. I'm joined, as always, in the background by my co-founder and the CEO, and of course our glamorous producer, Mr. Gene Quinn. He's in Connecticut. I'm in the UK today, and I'm very pleased to say that we're joined by Rick Bradbury, who's the director of North American Marketing at Sabre Travel Network, and alongside him today is Matt Beck. He's the Director for Solutions and Consulting at Reardon Commerce, which is now Deem, and they'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go forward. Now, interestingly, this is the world of live media. For those of you who are listening live, about 25 minutes ago, we had an email coming to say that there is a leadership transition at Sabre. So Tom Klein is now the new CEO of Sabre, so we've been sitting here reeling from that. So this is what live news media is all about. So anyway, a little bit of housekeeping. So what we do is we will be recording the entire event for you this afternoon. So don't worry if you have to dip out, or if indeed you're inspired by what you've heard and you want to pass it on to your colleagues and customers, you can do so, because we will post a recording and all the slides you're about to see up on tnooz.com, usually we hope within 12 hours or so, subject to how long these things take to upload to various channels. We have a Q&A right at the end of today's session, so if you have any questions, feel free to send them through to me at any time. You do that by using the questions button, which is on the right-hand side of your dashboard. And also, we will be inserting a series of polls throughout the webinar to, I guess, it's like a litmus test for how people are feeling about certain issues. However, we want you to familiarize yourself with the system beforehand. So your first poll today is a very simple one. I hope it's a very simple one, and it's this: where are you based? So you can click one of those four: North America, Europe, Middle East and Africa, Asia Pacific, or Latin America. So if you'd like to quickly click one of those buttons right now, please. You can see those results coming in. Many of you are undecided, which is a bit peculiar, but I'm sure you're just familiarizing yourself with it. And let's have those results up now then, Janine, please. And they are as follows. So nearly 3/4 of you today are in North America. Just under 1 in 5 Europe, Middle East and Africa, and you can see those other results there. We usually do get a very low result for Asia Pacific because it is indeed the evening, and we like people to do take some time off of work. So our second poll is much related around what we're going to be discussing this afternoon or this morning. So this is your question, everybody: can technology drive personalization in business travel as it has in consumer-facing businesses? And you've got 3 options here. So not a chance, possibly. Yes, it will massively improve strategy and process. And if you'd like to cast your votes there, please, as well. Thank you. Yeah, a little bit more to think about with this question. So I can see they're slightly starting to come in. But just a couple more seconds there, and I think we should throw up those results now. Thank you very much, Gene. So just 1% of you say not a chance, but overwhelming here, just over 2/3, 68% agree with the question that yes, it will massively improve strategy and process, which is a good thing for our panelists, and we feel obviously the wider industry, yeah, some slight skepticism there with a third of you, just under a third of you saying you're unsure. So without further ado, we do have a relative time constraint today. I'm now going to hand over to Rick and Matt. Rick, first of all, so it's Rick Bradbury, as I said, he's Director of North American Marketing for Sabre Travel Network. He is in South Lake in Texas in the US today, and it's a pleasure to hand over to you, Rick. Good morning where you are, and the floor is yours and Matt's. Go ahead, guys.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Kevin. We're excited to be on today, and we're excited to talk about this topic, how technology is enabling personalization in business travel. And I'm really glad that we have an opportunity. And looking at this slide here, so here's what we'd like to do. We'd like to just tee up some overall definitions and activities that are going on in the marketplace to level set on the framework that we're working through. And then as we go through, we'll talk about examples of personalization both in and out of travel, as well as how to merchandise to consumers and how to merchandise in a B2B environment, which is really an area that is not widely explored in either business travel or in B2B software in general. So to help us explore this topic, let's start with a couple definitions, and the first here is personalize. And what does that mean exactly? And I took a shot here, and this is what I came up with. Personalize, definition one, to make personal or individual, especially to tailor to one's own needs. And in the context of B2B software, definition number two, I just said personalize is really to customize software and technology settings based on one's preferences. And so the thing here about personalizing is personalization is done by the user or by the buyer, even if the supplier or the seller offers content or services that can be customized or tailored. So the second definition is from the seller's perspective. We'll go to the next slide, Kevin, and that is merchandising. And merchandising can be described as the following. The planning and promotion of sales by presenting a product at the proper place and with the proper price to the right customer, sort of your classic marketing, merchandising definition. In the context of software and business travel, definition number two is really it's about designing a user experience that facilitates the buying and selling of services, especially to promote targeted or customized offers. And we will spend a good deal of this webcast talking about targeting and customizing offers to individual travelers or individual employees. And so personalizing by the buyer and merchandising by the seller is what gets us to the heart of B2C. Next slide, Kevin. And so B2C, the model is pretty straightforward. A consumer acts as a buyer and a supplier acts as a seller. And an offer from the seller plus acceptance from the buyer equals a contract that can then be personalized to the needs of the buyer. But the actual execution of B2C can be anything but straightforward at times. And for those of you who market or sell products and services to consumers, you will know that consumers are hard to peg. And traditional segmentation approaches for getting to consumers are proving more and more difficult to use over time. Traditional demographic and psychographic segmentation models are morphing into entry points rather than destinations for even more granular set of targeting activities. So let's look at a few examples. Next slide, please. So here are some brands, some of which you are probably familiar with, and maybe a couple that you're not. And so most of the time when people think of personalization and merchandising, Amazon is a name that readily comes to mind. And they aggressively prompt and promote registered site visitors with personalized emails. They target users while on the actual site, searching, browsing, and shopping for products with items that they may be interested in. And I think most of you are pretty familiar with the Amazon experience. Amazon does really good about tapping into your preferences, and we'll talk a little bit more about that word preferences as well in just a minute. iTunes, I'm sure that this audience is well familiar with iTunes. and Genius, Apple took a recommendation approach and personalizes music recommendation for users based on past purchases. And so users can actually discover new music while also being encouraged to purchase things, and leveraging the power of peer-to-peer feedback, ratings, opinions is key to the personalization experience that iTunes is creating. Some different names like American Express, Amex cardholders can receive personalized offers based on spend history and location. And if you look there sort of in the middle, U-Bar, this one I love. I really love this. So U-Bar brings personalization to the industry by allowing customers to develop their own energy bar, personally selecting the ingredients inside the bar through an interactive website. And as I looked at that, I thought, boy, that goes way beyond putting your name on M&Ms and shipping them. It's a great example. Zeit. Take a look at what they're doing. Zeit focuses on convenience in a crowded field by sorting through tons of news and articles on the web, then filtering down to a refined list based on a user's stated preferences. And on the bottom there, off to the side, Airbnb. This is a good one. And I have a quick story to share on Airbnb. Last week I caught up with a good friend I grew up with, and he was sharing his experience with Airbnb, a site for booking rental properties around the world, and how his rental property is now one of the top 10 that appears in the search results in the Japanese city where he lives. So what's Airbnb's mission? And here's what they say: to deliver personalized local experiences. And their focus of bringing buyers and sellers together in a marketplace is familiar to us here at Sabre. No doubt, as Airbnb looks to the future, they will be increasingly focused on allowing those with properties to better set offers and those renting properties to use personalized search parameters to find the best match. So in talking about finding the best match and creating offers, let's talk about that a little bit more. So as Kevin mentioned, I'm here with Matt Beck of Deem, who has some additional insights on buying and selling. So Matt, tell us a little bit about how Deem is looking at personalization and merchandising. And even beyond that, how can relevance to the user be determined when establishing an offer?
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Rick. So just by way of 15-second introduction, since previously we certainly were doing business as Reardon Commerce, the transition to Deem is really to emphasize our focus on personalizing commerce. So when you think about Deem, Deem is an action word. I deem it, and that's kind of what we've done as to establish our new brand flag, if you will, that allows us to unify our various products and services over in the marketplace. So as you mentioned, really, what's this concept of personalization, and how does it make sense? Well, I mean, you've already mentioned things that in the past we've always used demographic inputs, and that's been the way we've been able to segment and manage customers. But what happens with personalization is you actually start to look and buyer behaviors, while similar, you have to make sure you're grouping according to what buyers are doing, and that's where the response inputs start to really drive kind of that personalization on the buyer side. Of course, sellers are looking to find people who want their product. So as we're trying to go through and manage, you're trying to use relevance to really make sure that sellers are finding the right audience to sell to in the right way and at the right time. Next slide, please. So as you look at this, what we do when you're starting to do relevance is the first thing is you're going to look at what responses has to do with our traditional demographic inputs, things like gender, where they're located, how far from the merchant are they, their email domain. But what happens, you can see that relevance starts to diminish over time, thus the lightening of that input, versus the other inputs which become far more relevant, which is now as we start to get to know who you are, what things are interesting to you, whether it's specific categories, specific price points, are you looking for the big deals, the big bargains, and as we get more information from a user, that's where we actually start to be able to leverage that in a much more relevant fashion for them and personalize their experience. The one part about demographics that never changes is really that location. because location is highly significant when you're trying to really transact and have commerce. Next slide, please. So as we look at what's the right way to do this, now at Deem we actually do have an offers engine that competes with the likes of say a Groupon or Living Social. We also then white label that out there, and what we do is there's a number of ways you can do personalization. What we found is that first, suppression is obviously an easy way. If it's not relevant to me, why are you showing it? I think we all have suffered what's called in the industry deal fatigue, and that's the fact that you get the email in the inbox and you don't even bother to open it, right? So it's better for us to send fewer emails and communicate less with our target audience. If it's not relevant, we'll just suppress. Secondary, obviously, if you have something that's more relevant to them, replace. Additionally, then you have augmentation and then kind of the optimization around where your schedule, where you're going to be, how you're going to be. So those all tie across, and what we've done is actually build an actual model, next slide please, that allows us to, at an individual basis, reflect what's going to take place and how likely a user is going to be to actually purchase it and manage that purchase that offer. And so you can see here just a small example of how that works. Where are we going to send out? We on a nightly basis, and again we have a small subset. If you've ever heard of HomeRun.com, that is a property that we own. And so we've actually tested this theory. And when you test a relevance engine, the way you manage that is you basically want to do better than nothing. Right, so nothing is I'm just going to spray an offer out there, and I know that on average it's going to stick X% of time. And what we want to do is make sure that when we apply an offer, we can beat that basis. So when we did that, we actually did some A/B testing where you're taking random samples and you're applying the model in one case and seeing how it works in the other, and it's amazing what that difference does. We're seeing 2.5 times the number of closes. So that's the amount of increase you actually see, and in doing that, we ended up suppressing and sending half the number of emails. So it becomes far more significant and far more relevant to a user, and the reason that's important is, again, as you go back to this concept of personalization, rather than annoying people, you're giving them what they want when they want it at the price they're looking for. Obviously this is from a consumer perspective, it's very consumer oriented, but I think now it probably makes sense to switch back, and I'll hand it back to you, Rick, where we can dive into the business side.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Matt. Deal fatigue is certainly something I experience, so it's nice to see that fleshed out. And when Matt and I reviewed this content, the slide that he had on suppression and replacement, augmentation and calendar optimization, that really hit home for me, not just to view it from the lens of a seller trying to promote an offer, but really just being a consumer myself, and all of you are consumers as well, looking at it through the lens of a consumer receiving an offer and just sort of envisioning what kind of targeting and sophistication might be behind the offer itself. So let's look at B2B. So here we've got the simple B2B framework, and the model for B2B is, hey, it's similar to that of B2C in that there's a buyer and a seller. But in a B2B world, the buyer, often a category manager, is buying on behalf of other users and may or may not be a user of the software himself. And that's where the additional complexity comes in. The category manager drives her company's policies and practices relative to her category. And that alone presents a different environment than B2C. Next slide, please. And so there's a whole host of things to look at from a category manager's perspective, and I've not detailed them all, but here are 5 topics that differentiate B2B from B2C. So we've got the topic of compliance, we've got supplier agreements and contracts, there's budgets and expenses and processes that go with that, there's the category itself and how to manage the category. So a management program around whatever it is in the case of travel, or in the case of other categories, technology or services. And then lastly, there's information about the employee, a profile, an HR data feed, all of that. And so key takeaway here from company policies and practices, next slide, is B2B personalization just has a greater number of constraints than B2C. And these constraints are what drive the uniqueness of B2B personalization and B2B merchandising. At most large companies, that means meeting buyer objectives before allowing merchandising to the user, and meeting buyer objectives before allowing users to personalize. And so here's a quick look at what objectives buyers have. They're pretty simple, actually. Next slide. Here's what buyers are trying to achieve. And this could be true for B2C or B2B buyers. We want to achieve much more for more. If we're going to pay more, we'd like to get incrementally more value out of it. And or we want to get more for the same. I want to pay the same price, but I'd like to just get more for whatever it is I'm paying. Or the same for less. And then lastly, less for much less. If I'm going to be paying less, I'd like to really shave off a lot of price and only get a little bit less. And so, but the objective most buyers are really trying to achieve is not either one of these four. It's, next slide please. It's more for less. Every one of us really loves more for less, getting more quality out of our purchase or a greater quantity out of our purchase for a lower price. That's the trophy we're all trying to achieve. It's true in B2C, it's true in B2B. We all want to achieve that. And so how do the category manager's objectives play out in travel? Let's go back to the slide on company policies and practices, which is the next slide, and we'll see how these correspond to the travel category. And so you see the 5 topics I outlined there at the top. And for compliance, what we see in the travel space is travel policy definition and the application of travel policy. Under supplier agreements, we've got preferred supplier commitments. On budgets and expenses, we've got an expense policy, reimbursement processes, and on category management, we have a whole program around travel. Most big companies do. It's the travel program. And so within that travel program is everything from just best practices, use of technology, duty of care requirements, traveler satisfaction, sort of a unique component of the travel category. And then around employee profiles, we've got specific profiles for travelers and technology and processes around how to manage those profiles. And so a key takeaway from this slide is there under the supplier agreements box, particularly as it relates to airlines. And it is this. Next slide. It is that travel content has evolved beyond fares and schedules. And so when you look 10 or 15 years ago, all that was really there was fares and schedules. That's what people bought, and that's what the B2B buyer was focused on. But now that travel content has moved beyond that, that in and of itself has introduced a new level of complexity for companies who have and manage preferred airline contracts. Next slide. So let's take a look at that. Where airline contracts are headed. I mentioned that air content has moved beyond fares and schedules, and that it has introduced a new level of complexity for corporate travel managers. I'd like to introduce you to a framework for traveler preferences, how that fits with corporate preferences, what airlines prefer to sell, and what corporate travel managers really prefer to buy, all with a look at how these buying and selling preferences might come together in the future. So it's sort of a futuristic look. Next slide, Kevin. So let's look at this. I've got 4 boxes here, and I've titled these 4 types of traveler preferences. The first is declared preferences. This is what travelers say they want. Those may be stated preferences in a profile or elsewhere. It's just, I'm a traveler, I do have stated preferences. I don't always stick to them, and that's where we'll focus here on some of the other categories. There is also observed preferences. So though I may say or declare that I like something specifically, what I actually search for may or may not be the same. Inferred preferences are what additional things I may be interested in based on the behaviors that I am exhibiting in the search or buying process. And we saw that example with Amazon, right? The inferred preference around, hey, we think you might like this because we're seeing that you're clicking in certain spots that are similar paths to what others have searched for. And then there are actual preferences, and that is, what do travelers actually choose ultimately? So 4 types of traveler preferences. Next slide, please. And we overlay those with corporate preferences. So though travelers, business travelers, may have these 4 different kinds of preferences and exhibit those behaviors as they travel, corporations too have preferences. They have preferences around travel policy, they have preferences around how they employ procurement best practices, and they have preferences around preferred airline contracts and what those are and how best to meet those. Next slide. So here's where we're at with buyers and sellers, and that is understanding how buyers prefer to buy and how sellers prefer to sell is at the heart of understanding the future of contracts. And that's not only true for the airline category, it's true for any category in travel, and it's true for any category outside of travel. Next slide. So let's look at some inventory that airlines will pull from as they go to sell different things to their audience. They have selling preferences, and they pull from a variety of different things. They sell and promote published airfares. They'll publish prices on ancillaries. They will brand their own fares, and so branded fares are fares with specific names and fare rules or attributes. So rather than a fare in, say, Y class or G class, a branded fare might be something like Weekend Hopper or Sky Saver. You give it a name, and those who shop identify the attributes that go with the branded fare over time. And then there's bundled fares. Bundled fares are fares that include a base fare coupled with select ancillaries that are included as part of a package. So think of a fare that also includes maybe lounge access and priority boarding all together. Different attributes and ancillaries that come together to form a package that makes sense and that the airline can market and sell. And of course, the last one here, a branded bundle, is simply those two combined. It's a bundled or packaged fare that has a specific name and a finite set of attributes that go with it. And over time, the lines between these will probably start to blur a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. We'll overlay those airline selling preferences with corporation buying preferences. And so the bottom, the blue categories, this is really how corporations are viewing their own buying habits and what they are interested in. So instead of published airfares, most corporations want discounted airfares. And discounting is a simple but effective practice that is at the heart of almost all travel management programs out there. And if corporations want discounted airfares, they probably want discounted ancillaries as well. So why pay full price for something when you can get it discounted? Company branded fares. Rather than having an airline brand a fare, maybe a company wants to brand its own fare. And there would be good reasons to do so when the specific fares or attributes that the company wants to promote to its travelers make sense for the traveler community. The same goes for bundled fares. A corporation will say, I get that an airline has pushed out this bundled fare to me or to my travelers, but maybe the items that are in the bundle aren't really what my corporation or my travelers purchase. And so rather than saying, oh, I'm interested in this airline bundled fare, many corporations are now starting to look to say, how can I bundle my own fare? And then the last one there, company branded bundles, how can I give them a name and attributes that make sense for my travelers in my travel program for my company? And it begs the question, we've got two different streams here and they interact with each other, but how will these two differing sets of preferences converge? Next slide. Here's one possibility, and that is when you look up there at that yellow box, airlines today have already gravitated toward predefined merchandising, meaning they will set criteria for groups of travelers and then present an offer. And I get that today when I check in online or at a kiosk. I'm sure you do too. Do you want to buy additional miles? Do you want to upgrade to first class? Would you like to purchase a premium seat? I mean, oftentimes you have to click, 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 click if you're just trying to check in for your flight, but that's what the airline is doing. And you know what? It will get uptake on a certain amount of those offers, even if a large portion of the travelers are not interested, they will get it because they are presenting something at the right time to the right travelers who see it, and they may not have that deal fatigue right at the moment where they may be inclined to make a purchase. And corporate buyers have already gravitated toward allowing merchandising that is policy compliant. But predefined merchandising is not enough for airlines, nor is policy compliant merchandising enough for a corporate buyer. And that is where buyers and sellers have the opportunity to work together to create B2B merchandising that is not just predefined and not just policy compliant, but that is dynamic and policy driven. Creating an instant merchandising opportunities to travelers that reinforce corporate objectives and policies. That's really what's going on in that green area. It's a complex undertaking, but you'll likely see the industry moving this direction, figuring out how buyers and sellers, airlines and corporations can figure out how to make merchandising work in that B2B environment that ultimately then produces a contract that you measure and manage. So I'm going to now hand it back to you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you very much. Lots of food for thought there. I mean, we feel like we're getting some really kind of academic look at how this is starting to drive out. It's fascinating stuff. So, but we thought we'd have a little breather for a second and test the audience and see where they are with all of this. So please, Jean, if you can throw up our third and final slide. So, which is the greatest obstacle to open travel and business travel? So is it financial risk and loss? Is it legacy technology? Or is it industry and company culture? So, you can see almost half of you have voted. Ah, here we go. A sudden flurry of votes, and a lot more evenly split than in the earlier poll as well. So let's have those results up, Jean, please. Okay, so financial risk and loss of control just over a third, legacy technology a quarter, industry and company culture is 41%. So with that in mind, we're going to before I hand back, just to remind you all that we are, if we've got time, we'll get to some questions at the end for our panel this afternoon. So you can do so by just clicking the questions button on the right-hand side of your module. So I'm going to hand back now again to Rick. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, this has actually been really great and engaging stuff. I almost think, Kevin, an hour is too little time to really hit some of the details of this one.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, let's keep going because we're looking forward to seeing what the final section is. Go for it, sir.
Okay. So the key takeaway from the last part there is personalization needs to be balanced with company objective. So here's a couple things that we've been doing here at Sabre, some really cool stuff. Let's go to the next slide. And that is first creating personalized travel offers. So we recently launched custom offers, and this is one of the coolest things that we have launched in the last 12 months. Custom offers enables, let's say in this case, in the screenshot at the top, hoteliers to execute data-driven marketing campaigns to make unique offers available to targeted travelers, essentially creating an endless number of unique personalized offers such as special rates, room upgrades, premium hotel services, maybe it's a free meal, Wi-Fi, maybe it's spa service, or maybe it's something altogether different. For B2B, these custom offers actually work in conjunction with negotiated rate shopping as well. So when an agent shops using rate codes or any rate type, the hotelier will still return the rate codes and types requested, but will now have the opportunity to supplement those with a promotional offer. In the airline space, that one at the bottom, we're building additional custom offers functionality for the airspace as well. So the initial phase we're working on provides airlines 2 levels of personalization. The first based on individual frequent flyer number, the second based on frequent flyer tier level, and then subsequent phases will provide airlines additional offer capabilities, including the ability to make a broader range of unique offers available to targeted travelers using our custom offers campaign engine. Next slide. We're personalizing the business travel experience for travelers as well. So with Get There, online booking is both personal and interactive with hotel traveler reviews, allowing business travelers to share and view online content during the shopping process. Tripcase, one of the top consumer mobile travel apps in the Apple App Store, just went corporate in a big way. With Tripcase Corporate, corporations will have the ability to target messages to their travelers based on their specific itinerary to give them guidance on company policy, security, negotiated benefits, etc. So really awesome new developments. Get There and Tripcase deepening the links around personalization right within the self-service tools. Next slide. And many of you may have caught our TrueTrip example. This one is awesome. We just unveiled TrueTrip, an exciting service that will be available in the months to come. It's a service that syncs travel from many sources into a single view for everyone, travelers, agencies, and corporations. Through the we're building this TrueTrip hub, and through that hub, itinerary information will be aggregated, normalized, and then synced across mobile, online, and offline travel management tools. So it's an industry first. It's a shared graphical itinerary that can be used and dynamically updated between Get There, Tripcase, and the Sabre Red workspace. And here's one of the distinguishing features of TrueTrip. It will be a new TrueTrip Red app that imports active, passive, and other itinerary elements directly into the Sabre Red workspace, into the agent's workflow, allowing him or her to seamlessly view and support a more comprehensive set of itinerary elements, both in and out of program. And so travelers now have a more complete itinerary experience across these tools. So Matt, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome, thanks. So as we look at kind of this personalization in a business context, one of the things that gives us a really easy way of visualizing how personalization works is to look at a game that is certainly dated in many ways, but that of pachinko. Now, the way pachinko works is you shoot up some ball bearings and they hit the pegs, and then there's a distribution pattern that emerges, which is why some are worth far more than others, because inherently the distribution pattern is going to skew towards those numbers that are the least. When you're putting together a model, you need to understand kind of this pattern, what actually filters down to the bottom and has statistical significance to help predict behavior moving forward. And as you mentioned, with regards to business, it ends up being a lot different as to what may be driving those things. If you'll go to the next slide, we can see how this actually works in a real world as we look at, for example, hotel. You've got a number of different visible and easily tracked conditions. Just go ahead and build it out. And so what happens is, does it have wireless internet? Does it have air conditioning? Is there a pool? These all seem to be, oh, well, I get what they're looking for. But what we need to understand is these other inferred features. And so some of these inferred features, for example, what we've done at our company is we've actually gone and we manually reviewed 15,000 different TripAdvisor ratings for hotels. And the funny thing is, when you review them, you're only about 80%. If I review and Rick reviews, only 80% of the time will we agree whether it was positive or negative. But that's where we've actually done this and built out a model that enables us to evaluate over 300 criteria for any individual hotel to kind of determine. And what that shows us is you may have non-stated semantically relevant features, for example, comfy beds, that are helping to drive what your preference is being driven by. And so really the most important part of developing any model is understanding what are both those stated and inferred values and what are the criteria people are leveraging. If you'll turn to the next page, go to the next slide. And this is really what we've done as we've developed our model to help us understand and actually personalize. So when we personalize for corporate, we help them understand what's the most important from their perspective, what's the most important from the company perspective, and we have the ability to really bias based on the weightings that the companies are interested in and users are applying to those. But what you'll find is initially we may just know the fact that you work for a company and its size, which says, hey, John, at first we're going to say you've never booked anything, so let's just look at what's popular in Chicago. But then once we start to know a little bit about you, we can say, hey, you've booked at this brand of hotel in the past, so you may like these. Have you ever booked, anybody else who's similar to you? And that's where you can slowly get more and more information and refine that down until you've actually got a much more relevant offering so that you're saving him time and effort. The best example, just in a generic fashion, would be think of the supermarket. You go there, there's over 100 kinds of cereal. Each of you probably picks 3 or 4 for your household. Wouldn't it be great if every time you walked down that cereal aisle, those 3 or 4 were just pushed out for you? So you could grab them as you walked by rather than having to search. That's why we tend to go to the same supermarket, because we know right where to find them. Our goal is to do the same thing for travelers when they show up. With that, I'm going to hand it right back to Rick, and we'll dive through the end of the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you. We're going to hit total customer experience. Some brands stand out today for their focus on creating an integrated and planned consumer experience at many different touch points. Salesforce, Dell, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Disney experience. I always feel like I do have a magical experience at Disney, even if I have to keep opening my wallet to make it more magical. But Disney just knows when, where, and how to make individuals and families have a good time. So, key takeaway here, next slide, is that personalization will become increasingly embedded in B2B software, and we'll start to see this. Next slide. Mobile marketing and one-to-one personalization. This is a key thing in B2C and B2B markets today, and most features of a phone, aside from, let's say, the location or the camera, can be boiled down into 6 different categories. Messaging, so SMS, MMS, email. There's the browsing function. There's downloading function for apps. There's proximity features, voice features, and content, multimedia content in the form of video, audio, text, picture. So lots to keep track of, but this is really what you need to remember about mobile. Next slide. And that is, mobile is the new personalization frontier. It will just be so. It allows marketers to do new, different, and unique things that they've never been able to do in the past, and it allows users of that mobile technology to personalize in a way that they have never been able to in the past. So next slide. I'd like to just recap some of the key points that we hit on throughout the webcast. Things to remember, and that is B2B personalization has a greater number of constraints than B2C. Travel content has evolved beyond fares and schedules in the airline space. Personalization needs to be balanced with company objectives. Personalization will become increasingly embedded in B2B software, and mobile is really the new personalization frontier. So Kevin, I will turn it right back over to you.
Thank you very, very, very much, guys. This is great stuff, and we had one of our guys in GBTA in San Diego last week, and he came back talking a lot about some of these issues. So, before we get to the audience Q&A, we have had a couple here come in, which is great. Please keep sending those in, and we'll try and get to them. Just before we get to that, then, so And where does all this kind of go? I mean, the slide here says exactly that. What does the future hold? I mean, and what steps do you think the industry as a whole needs to go through before it gets to perhaps what is this hallowed future ahead of us?
So I'll address it first, Kevin, from my perspective. I think we need to realize that this concept of personalizing business commerce will extend to incorporate all aspects of business travel, not just the purchase of travel and its subsequent expense reporting, which is kind of where we stand today. Personalization is going to kind of drive the next generation of buying criteria. That's what's going to differentiate between tools. And really, it's how you win that trophy that Rick referred to, which is the trophy of getting more for less. And the way that's going to happen is because tools are going to address far more than just our existing structure of travel itself, and likely be including things like dining, entertainment, and all those other unmanaged purchases. And I think that we'll see that happen initially through a mobile device, and then it'll probably expand from there. But when you need it, why you need it, and being able to actually take care of that.
Good, and this is Rick. I've got a couple thoughts on that as well. So from our perspective at Sabre, when we look ahead and we look at the future of merchandising and personalizing, it's actually a really bright future, and it's one that we have really staked a claim and said, we intend to be a leader in this space. And so as you look at how things are evolving now and where they're headed, it's really right now around what I would call ecosystem investments, and that is there are a lot of different players involved in the entire travel ecosystem: suppliers, hotels, and airlines. There are industry bodies. There are intermediaries, like you take an ATPCO or a fair filing. You'll have standards bodies. You'll have technology providers, and everybody is sort of working together in different ways to create new functionality, and they're all making investments. And it's all moving forward. And we've seen certain things that we used to talk years ago about just being conceptual actually go live. And we're talking about other things which we know will go live in the future. It's just like e-ticketing. When it rolled out, everybody had to make investments, and ultimately everybody moved to that environment. It's the same with merchandising and personalization. The other area, I think, and going back to that topic of personalization in B2B software, I really do think the wave of customer experience management, CXM, is hitting us. So the sum of all the processes a company uses and the experiences it creates throughout a given activity, or even throughout the whole lifetime of a customer's interaction with a particular brand or vendor, that is really where software is going, is creating functionality within the tools to create a better customer experience overall.
Okay, thank you guys. So I'm going to get to some of the questions here. I think I sense we have one here from someone slightly skeptical at the coalface of all of this, and he asks, we've actually been hearing about many of these ideas for the last 2 or 3 years, say, and it doesn't feel as the industry as a whole that it is moving towards this kind of vision that you've both just eloquently outlined. I mean, would you agree that the industry as a whole is slow to get this, or are we on the cusp of some kind of acceleration now as a result of various things that have been going on?
Well, I think you're going to see similar to what happened with online booking. Online booking took probably 2 or 3 years of existence prior to there being the mad gold rush when everybody decided they had to have one. And you're even going to see that that's actually regionalized, because even today, when you talk about what a good adoption rate is, that's a very different perspective in Europe than it is in the U.S. And so it certainly is going to be an evolution rather than a revolution. But I think that you already have people staking their claims, and you're going to have leaders in the space establishing that leadership position now, which will then help drive initial uptake and then subsequent kind of following that will take as the industry catches up.
Adoption is actually a good word. Yeah. So the functionality in many cases already exists. It's just a matter of educating and getting usage and adoption. And so right now when we look at Sabre, We've got a few clients, suppliers in particular, using some of those merchandising capabilities that are live today, and those that are actually achieving really big results with them. And so we are out there educating others, and our pipeline is really full. Our pipeline is bigger than our actual customer list because we are moving up that adoption curve.
So here's the question that comes up in various guises very frequently, and that's how do you incorporate policy in new technology, especially government policy that is often very complicated and is multi-layered?
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of what I mentioned before, and that is merchandising needs to be policy compliant. That was back on one of those previous slides that had the framework, and that just is not happening today. So what suppliers and buyers need to do is have a more forthright discussion on what the policy is, what merchandising or what offers are in program or acceptable, and then using technology to actually filter and refine what is presented or offered. And that, too, I would say, is on the cusp of some major changes. Within the next couple of years, I think the policy question will be more addressed. Back on the previous question around sort of merchandising and whatnot, you'll see huge adoption spikes of that even within 12 months from now.
So Gene, my glamorous producer here, wants to come in with a question. Gene? Or maybe. Gene, are you there, sir? No. Okay, well, we'll move on to the next question. He might be having an issue at his end. So, I've lost my train of thought here. So, Tom Molesky asks, good day to you, Tom. So, while this is all very interesting, it seems that the focus is still on B2C and not B2B, which from the airline's perspective, there's always been frequent flyer programs, all this kind of stuff. It says all the personalization that he sees does not take into account corporate policy. So we're getting into the policy area again. You suggested personalized discount bundling by airlines and fees. Have you actually seen it, or have you actually seen that, or are you just suggesting that it might be part of this grand future? I mean, are we seeing live examples? I think is probably what Tom's getting to here, or are we not seeing this yet? It's still much more vision stuff here.
Good. Yeah, no, I'll take that question. I think that's a good one. So at GBTA, you mentioned GBTA, Kevin. I moderated a panel similar to this topic, and I had two buyers on the panel, two corporate buyers. I had an airline as well. And we talked about that in particular, and I asked the question, are you driving discounted ancillaries and looking at bundles in your program? And one of the buyers said, yes. In fact, I have discounted ancillary prices today in my program. And the other buyer said, well, I need to talk to you about how you're doing that. And so
Right.
The dialogue is starting to occur. The technology exists today for a corporation to negotiate a discounted ancillary and to have the carrier file that through ATPCO, and then to have those discounted ancillary prices actually render in the corporate points of sale. Where we're going with that is the bundling aspect. So certain pieces of that functionality from an ecosystem are not fully live yet, but that's where things are headed. And so, but you're right, policy is one of those last remaining frontiers of how do you get merchandising to work within a policy environment.
Indeed. I'm conscious of time now. Gene is with us now. Gene, I hope.
Yeah, just a quick one, Rick and Matt. I noticed in your presentation you really didn't speak about the company-related issue of business social networking. One of the implications of what's possible now is that, and this comes from the cultural response that we had in that question number 3, how so many people think that the industry is still lagging the consumers in their in many ways about how the culture is holding back some of this innovation occurring, some of this new stuff occurring. In the customer experience management, has Sabre or Deem thought about how to provide tools to companies that help them manage in the ways that customer relationship management business software manages in sort of a impersonal and distant way, but in more of a customer experience way with tools that you could be providing to the traveling executive in the context of the travel services that you guys are providing companies.
We're looking at each other. Who wants to take this one? So I will take it here. On social networking, let's hit that one first. Technology is not the issue in social networking, not in the B2C or even in the B2B context. So that's not the issue. It's really about what does the company want to allow within its program. So it's a usage or adoption issue and a culture issue more than it is a technology issue. And technology vendors, they're really not going to develop new capabilities around social unless they think there's actually a market and an appetite for buying and monetizing those. And then around customer experience management, we actually do a lot of that today, particularly in our agency environment with our client base tool, where we have essentially a CRM tool that's really good about marketing to customers, particularly when coupled with our client-based marketing services. We put some really sophisticated tools in the hands of agencies to allow them to target different customers and push out promotions and messages to them at just the right time based on certain event triggers. Very popular functionality that we continue to invest in, and other areas, of course.
Okay, and so thank you for that. I'm just, like I said earlier, conscious of the time, and just as you were asking the question, Gene, we did have two that came in almost addressing exactly the same thing. So it's obviously of wider concern. So final wrapping up then. Let's go to you first, Matt. I mean, do you sense that we'll be, going back to some of the, like, you sense this skepticism around how far is this going to go? Where do you think we will be? What kind of things we will be discussing in 3 years' time around these issues, or do you think the industry will have sufficiently moved along enough by then?
I think your mobile device is really where you're going to have the next battle is going to be taking place. Where within that mobile device, you're going to have access to these social networking as applicable, the merchandising as applicable, and really kind of the ability for users to make intelligent purchase decisions while traveling. And I think we're going to see evolution rather than revolution. We're going to continue discussing. You're going to have laggards that haven't even thought about introducing it. You're going to have the forefront of technology who are already engaged and reaping the benefits, and then a lot of us in the middle who are still deciding which side of the fence we're going to sit on.
Okay, the final word goes to you, Rick.
Okay, well, I think mobile and tablets is really where things are spiking in the technology space, and so you'll not only see products that are entirely mobile, but you'll see mobile versions of previously sort of desktop software devices as well. So being able to do things while you're on the go and portable is a key component of where things are going, and it will be a key component of personalization as well. And a year from now, we will be having a different conversation. I think things are moving that quickly in the merchandising space.
Okay, it's nice to end on a very positive note there. So apologies to those that did submit questions. We didn't get around to them. What we have done is made a record of every single one of those, and our two panelists will get back to you, hopefully, with some answers to some specific questions. There's some quite technical ones in there that we didn't get to, and some wider ones as well that I hope they will do. So it only goes for me to remind you all then that we have recorded the entire webinar, and all the slides will be posted with the recording on Tnooz usually about within 12 hours or so, as I said earlier. So it only goes for me to say thank you very much to Matt Beck from Reardon Commerce, Dean, and also to Rick Bradbury at Sabre Travel Network in Texas. Obviously, our enormous thanks to Sabre Travel Network for working with us again on what I think has been a really excellent webinar this afternoon. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everybody, as always, for listening in, and thanks to Gene for driving things behind the scenes. Enjoy the rest of your respective days, and we'll hope to catch you all again soon. Thanks a lot.
Sorry,
The organizer has